Hey everyone! In today's Lightroom tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how I batch edit a set of photos to make them look cohesive. So I just got back from Scotland a couple of days ago. I was there to photograph a wedding, and Dan and I also had some spare time to explore Scotland, and I took so many photos while we were there. These are some of the photos that we'll be editing today. We have shots taken on the Canon 50 1.2, the Canon 35 1.4. We also have a shot taken on the Samyang 135. We have cityscapes and landscapes. So in today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how I would edit these photos to make them look cohesive and to make them look like a set. When it comes to batch editing a set of photos, the first thing that I want to do is pick my favorite photo of the set to focus on first. So I'm going to be editing this landscape right here. The first thing I want to do is do my basic adjustments. So I'm going to adjust the horizon line so it's a bit more straight. Then I'm also going to sharpen this image up a little bit, and then go ahead and do my basic adjustments to get the image looking balanced. So I'm going to start by bringing down the highlights to bring back those beautiful clouds in the sky. I'm also going to bump up my shadows a little bit and bring up the contrast. And the last thing that I also want to do is fix up the lens correction. So I'm going to tick enable profile correction, which will automatically select what camera and lens that I'm using and fix up any distortion. And normally when I do this, it gets rid of all the vignetting. So I'm going to bring that down to about 50, as I do like to have a little bit of vignetting in my photos. So here is a before and after of our basic adjustments. The image is looking nice and flat. It's a good base for us to start working with. So when it comes to making a set of images cohesive, you need to pick a style that you want to go for when it comes to editing. For me personally, I like to edit my photos to have a matte look, and I do this by using the tone curve. So think about what your style of editing is, what you prefer, what you want your photos to look like. Maybe you also want the matte black kind of look. Maybe you prefer your photos to be high contrast and really punchy and saturated. Maybe you prefer low contrast with low saturation. So whatever style you're after, that's how you're going to edit your first image. So heading into the tone curves for the matte black, I'm going to create a simple S-curve. I'm just going to jot down some points really roughly. And once I'm seeing what that looks like, then I'm going to slowly adjust the points until I'm happy with what the image looks like. If you're unsure of how to use the tone curve, I have a tutorial up on my channel, which I'll leave linked in the description below, which basically explains everything on how to use the tone curve. So I'm happy with how that's looking. Here's a before and after of just the tone curve. I'm also going to head into the blue channel of our tone curve, and I'm also going to add a similar S-shaped curve in the blue channel. So by bringing up the blues here, we're adding a lot of blues to the shadows of the image. And then I like to bring the shadows down just to make that green really stand out and pop in the photo, because Scotland is super green. So I really want to convey that with my editing. And then up here in the highlights, I'm just going to bring the blue curve up to make the sky and the widest bits of the image a little bit more blue. I'm also going to bring this up. It looks a bit intense. Okay, so here's a before and after of the tone curves. And the other thing I want to do is to just bring down the saturation and the vibrance just a little bit. I do kind of prefer to have my images not be super saturated. So I'm really happy with how that's looking so far. Here is a before and after of all our edits. This is the before and this is the after. So now we're going to sync these edits to the rest of the photos in our catalog. So we're going to have the image that we edited selected down here. Then I'm going to hold down the Shift key and click on the first image. Then I'm going to hold down on Command and just click on these last three images that are here and press sync. When we're in sync, I'm just going to check all for the time being. The only things that I want to untick are local adjustments, spot removal and crop, because they are very specific to the images that you're editing. It's not something you really want to sync across everything, and just hit synchronize. The next step of the process is to now go back to the very first image in our set, and we're going to do our basic adjustments that we did first. now to all the images so they have the correct exposure and the correct white balance. So this image, for example, is looking a bit dark, so we're just going to bump up the exposure and also the white balance, bring up the temperature warmth. This next photo is looking a little bit bright, so I'll just bring down the exposure a tiny bit and also crop it in as it looks pretty far away. This image just needs a little bit of exposure brought down, and I'm also going to bump up the tint because it's looking a little bit too green. This next image is super dark, so again, let's just bump up the exposure, and because it's so green compared to everything else, we're also going to bring the tint up a little bit and also adjust the crookedness. This next image was taken on the Samyang 135T 2.2, so with this one we're going to bring down the exposure. I also want to crop it in a little bit as I feel like there is too much sky in the photo. So bring that in a little bit tighter. And I also want to go into HSL luminance and brighten up the flowers here in the corner just by bringing that slider up. I also am going to bring the shadows and the blacks down a little bit as this image looks really kind of washed out and bright overall. So here's a before and after. This next image of the sheep is good, I'm happy with that. Now we have this really wide landscape shot, which I'm going to bring the exposure down just a touch and bump up the contrast as well. And I want the green to be a little bit more saturated, so we're going to go into HSL hue and bring up the yellows just to make that green look a little bit more mossy. So here's before and after with HSL. This image is looking dark, so we're going to bring up the exposure. And I'm going to again go into HSL luminance to darken up the grass over here on the side. So we're going to bring the yellow slider down and the green slider down as well. And that just kind of helps balance out the image because the grass is looking very overexposed. And I'm also going to bump up the contrast just a little bit more as well. So there's the before and the after. Then we have the landscape that we edited in the first place, and now we have a couple of portraits that Dan and I took of each other as well. This one I think just needs a little bit of exposure brought up. I'm happy with that. I actually really like how it's super dark in this corner from the clouds. Adds a nice little moodiness to the photo. And then we have Dan's shot, bring up his exposure and bring the highlights down as well because the sky is super bright up here. And last but not least, we have this portrait, which again, I'm going to bring the exposure quite dark. I don't mind if I'm more of a silhouette in this shot, just because I want the landscape and the sky and those sun rays to really stand out in the photo. Okay, there's before and after. So now I want to show you what all these photos look like all together. As you can see, they're starting to look a little bit more cohesive. They've all got the same exposure, they've all got similar colors and a similar mood to them as well. But there is still one more step that I like to take to just add to that cohesiveness even further, and that's to use split toning in Lightroom. Again, I do also have a full tutorial about what split toning is and how to use it, so if you guys are interested in that, I'll also leave that link down below. We're going to start by going on our last image and heading into develop and going all the way down to our split toning right here. So I already have an idea in mind of what I want these photos to look like. I really want to add some cyan to the sky because the photos from Scotland that we took were so cloudy and moody. So I think the blue will really help add to that. And it will also help add a little bit of color to that overcast sky. So I'm going to bring it up a little bit more into the blues and then bring down the saturation just to blend that out into the image. And then if you guys have watched any of my other Lightroom tutorials, you would know that I like to use opposite colors for split toning. So because we use blue for the highlights, I want to have a reddish kind of orange tone for the shadows. And I think this will really help bring out that rocky landscape that Scotland has. So I'm going to bring the hue up just a little touch, just about there. It's a little bit of a orangey yellow kind of mix. And again, just bring down the saturation so it's not way too much in the image. So here is a before and after of just the split toning. This is without split toning and this is with split toning. And I really feel like it adds that little extra touch to an image. And now we're going to sync the split toning to the rest of the photos. So we have the image with split toning selected down here. So I'm going to hold down Shift and click on the first image of the batch and then hit sync. So this time we're going to hit check none and only have split toning ticked. So that's the only thing that will change when you sync the settings to the rest of the photos. So we'll just take a quick peek at what it's looking like in the grid. The last steps that you need to take now, once we've synced all the split toning, is to once again just go through each of the images one by one to make sure that you're happy with how they look. So we're going to go back to the first one. And for this one, now that we've added the reds to the shadows, I think the white balance is a little bit too much. So we're going to bring that back down and also add a little bit more pinks to the tint. The next image, I'm thinking I might bring down the saturation of the blue highlights as it's bleeding into the rooftop of this building here in the photo. I'm happy with this one. This one's good. I'm also very happy with this one. This photo is looking a little bit too warm, so I'll bring down the temperature and bring in a little bit more tint into the pinks. And I think the sheep is looking a little bit blue. So again, we're going to bring down the saturation of the highlights. I think that's good. I'm going to bring down the saturation of the highlights on this one as well, just so it's not so much cyan in this photo. This one I'm really happy with. I like how it's added a lot of blue to the water as well. This photo as well, I feel like has that little bit too much cyan, so we're going to bring down that saturation. And I'm also going to bring down the temperature so it's a little bit cooler overall. This photo is looking, again, a little bit too green, so I'm going to bring up the tint and also bring down the vibrance, just so it's a little bit more desaturated. Then we have this photo, which looks really cool, and the last one that we had already worked on. So here are the final images in a grid. As you can see, the split toning really brought that look all together and made these images look like they were in a set, even though they were taken on different days with different lenses in different lighting conditions and landscapes as well. So that is pretty much my beginning to end process of how I batch edit images. Normally I just use Lightroom presets that I've created because that's already got the colored look to it, but obviously for the sake of this tutorial, I wanted to show you guys how to do this from scratch. I really hope you guys found today's tutorial helpful. Please let me know what you thought of it in the comments and if you'd like to see more batch editing tutorials. Also, I just wanted to say a little side note, I just realized we hit 200,000 subscribers. I want to thank you guys so much. I'm so excited and can't wait to just continue making photography videos for you guys. But yeah, as always, I make new videos every single Wednesday. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you guys all next time. Bye!